This is the CBS Evening News. Bob Schieffer reporting. Good evening. Airline officials said tonight that they are confident all of the bodies from this week's air crash in Iowa have now been recovered, and the airline says it now believes 186 people survived, 110 people died. That news as United announced that it's decided to make an inspection of all DC-10s in the fleet, and at the scene of the crash, most activity today centered on trying to determine just what caused it. Mark Phillips has the latest now from there.
Investigators were lifting a section of the fuselage of the United DC-10 today, trying to get a look at more of the plane's hydraulic system to see if it in fact had failed completely as the pilot reported, and looking to see if there were more bodies of victims trapped underneath. There were none. As investigators continue to comb through the wreckage, more detail has been released on the flight's final moments following the explosion in its tail engine.
The only control mechanism that the crew had was to use engine thrust for control.
With the hydraulics out, the flight crew was joined in the cockpit by an off-duty United pilot who was on board as a passenger. He was on his knees working the throttle levers while the pilot and co-pilot tried to control the plane. Pushing the throttle levers forward would move the plane's nose up. Easing off would make it fall. It was a harrowing and uncomfortable ride.
But the effect of this rapid movements in the throttles was to create a porpoising situation, which continued throughout the flight.
Lines from the plane's 3 hydraulic systems come close together in the tail of the plane, particularly in the area that was damaged by the exploding engine. If the lines were severed, as appears to have happened, then the hydraulic system would be destroyed. And that remains the main theory as to why this crash happened.
You also have to be conservative about that, to not begin dropping things out just because someone thinks they know something.
This engine behind me is another of the DC-10's engines. It's the number 3 engine. The large assembly at the front of it is the fan section, the part that disintegrated and blew up on the tail engine, the number 2. Just how and why that fan assembly blew up is the great mystery investigators here will have to solve. Waiting for those answers, the survivors, more of whom left today, and the relatives of those who died. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Sioux City.
It's been 3 days now since the crash, but many of those who survived still can't quite believe it all happened, and we have more on that part of the story from Frank Courier.
Only 3 days after surviving the horror of Flight 232, Stephen Willowite is safe at home amid Saturday chores in suburban Chicago, feeling good but hurting inside.
We left people on the plane. That haunts me. Well, I haven't dreamt about it, but you think about it.
The haunting image of those who didn't make it is but a part of the emotional pain just beginning, experts say, for everyone touched personally by the disaster.
You can never prepare a human being or for the emotional trauma and things that you witness when you're involved in an incident of this magnitude.
Throughout Sioux City, where flags today fly at half-staff and the curious keep their chain-link vigil over the crash cleanup, emergency room nurse Patty Budden says she's still sickened by the memory.
To have that mass number of people come through there, hurt that bad, is something you just, I don't know if you can ever forget that.
Tony Feeney won't forget. The 14-year-old Casper, Wyoming high school freshman was battered and burned when the jet split apart just 2 rows in front of him.
I still remember it real good. And I'll probably have to deal with it for a couple of years still.
What many firefighters and crash rescue workers are feeling today are the first symptoms of post-traumatic stress.
I had a real sense of emptiness, and I was just kind of felt all alone, and you don't forget it.
Flight 232 will be remembered as much for the grief and pain of loved ones lost as for the unselfish spirit of those who helped so many others to survive. Frank Courier, CBS News, Sioux City, Iowa.
And still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, the push on Capitol Hill to get nuclear weapons plants to clean up their acts, and later a new cycle in U.S.-Soviet naval relations. There was a mysterious official silence today surrounding that top-level U.S. Foreign Service officer who's suspected of being this country's most damaging spy in decades. Pentagon correspondent David Martin's in our Washington bureau now and has the latest. David? Bob, the State Department says Felix Bloch, formerly the second-ranking American diplomat in Vienna, has been suspended for having unauthorized contacts with the Soviet Union.
In other words, he is suspected of espionage, the highest-ranking State Department official ever to fall under such a cloud. There was no sign of Bloch today at his Washington apartment, which has been under surveillance by the FBI. A 30-year veteran of the Foreign Service, Bloch was officially the deputy chief of mission in Vienna, but he served as acting ambassador for a while when the top job was empty. He was sent home for insubordination in 1987 by then Ambassador Ronald Lauder.
As a part of the embassy, he had access to a great deal of information. There was enough information there that he could do severe damage.
Bob, there's speculation that Bloch may have been tempted into espionage by his anger at being passed over for an ambassadorship. But right now, it's important to remember that he has not yet been charged, much less convicted.
Well, David, as we just heard, the former ambassador there said that there's potential for a great deal of damage. How do you suppose this is going to stack up? We've had kind of a string of these things over the last couple of years. How does this compare, say, to some of the ones we've known about in previous days?
A lot of the other cases involve much lower-ranking people, and it turns out, curiously enough, that lower-ranking people can sometimes do more damage than higher-ranking officials. John Walker, the Navy spy, gave the Soviets the Navy's codes, and the Soviets were able to read U.S. communications. Edward Lee Howard, the CIA spy, gave the Soviets the identities of CIA agents inside Moscow or inside the Soviet Union, and those people subsequently lost their lives. Bloch would not normally deal with that kind of nitty-gritty detail, but he sure could tell them a lot about the inner workings of American diplomacy.
No indication yet when and if some kind of charges might be filed other than this suspension.
No, it appears that he is now being interrogated by the FBI, but we do not know how much, if anything, he is admitted to.
All right, thank you, David. Some men are returning to work, but at least half the Soviet Union's 1 million coal miners remain on strike tonight. Soviet officials warn the walkout is threatening other key industries. Jan Charlton reports on that.
The head of the country's coal commission made a passionate appeal to go back to work and give the government until December to decide what to do. His skeptical audience, the thousands of miners out in the huge Ukraine mining region who earlier today turned down flat a government offer that met more than 80% of their demands. We need better working conditions, he says, and we're not leaving until we get them. They dig deep for coal here, down almost 1,000 feet at this Lidyanka mine, one of the oldest in the area. And the miners tell us that working conditions here are appalling. Everything is still done by hand, and so far this year, 4 men have died. Fear that what little safety standards there are might slip during the strike kept these men on watch. It's 100% or nothing, he says. We won't go back in until it's safe. And fear is the real issue, not food. There are complaints that meat is scarce, but a surprise visit to this state store showed shelves far better stocked than in Moscow. The widows and wives say too many deaths, too many injuries, too much talk by the Moscow bureaucrats as far away as the Tsar once was, and just as little help. Some say the strike will end when the miners feel they've made their point. If they don't get results in the mines, another go-round could find them as unmovable as the slag heaps they helped to build. Jan Charlton, CBS News, the Ukraine.
And as if the coal strike wasn't enough, Soviet leaders face increasingly violent ethnic disputes, the latest one in the Republic of Georgia. We have more on that now from Barry Peterson.
In a stunning admission of failure tonight, Soviet authorities say even military force is not working to quell the violence between the minority of Abkhazians and Soviet Georgians. Special troops have not been able to stop roving gangs of heavily armed men intent on killing each other. The Abkhazians drive by shooting at Georgian homes, says this man. But Abkhazians make the same charge, that Georgians are firing on them with foreign-made machine guns. One result of the increasingly deadly terror, a funeral today for 2 members of the security force gunned down last night. The men killed while trying to clear a barricade blocking a local street. And on Soviet television, more evidence tonight of just how widespread ethnic violence is becoming in the Soviet Union. From Nagorno-Karabakh, where Muslims and Christians have been fighting for more than a year, talks go on, but so does guard duty for the troops and tanks. From Uzbekistan, where Turks were attacked last month and thousands had to flee, pictures of men charged with murder. This one killed 4 people, then used gasoline to set the bodies on fire. These children told Soviet television about beating up their Turkish playmates. "We're sorry we did it," they say. "We wish our friends could return home." Gary Peterson, CBS News, Moscow.
China, in a new policy statement, says that Hong Kong can keep its capitalist system only if its residents do not support the pro-democracy movement. With China scheduled to take control of the British colony in 8 years, the warning is certain to heighten the rush to immigrate, and the United States may be willing to help out on that. Linda Tyra has more.
In the U.S., a sympathetic Congress is considering raising the immigration quota for Hong Kong Chinese from the current 5,000 people per year. One bill would boost the annual quota to 20,000 people, another to as high as 50,000.
We could say to these people, don't worry, if your freedom is suppressed and your human rights are frustrated, the U.S. stands ready to receive you.
Assurances like this will no doubt boost confidence and morale in Hong Kong.
3.5 million people in Hong Kong hold British passports, and increased quotas could put pressure on Great Britain to be more receptive to Hong Kong immigration. So far, the British government has been reluctant to open its doors, prompting an angry reception for British Foreign Secretary Geoffrey Howe earlier this month. Hong Kong is growing increasingly nervous. Just yesterday, the Chinese government warned residents there that Hong Kong can remain capitalist only if its people stop supporting the pro-democracy movement.
China needs Hong Kong, Hong Kong needs China. These economic fundamentals will determine that Hong Kong's future will be stable.
But few are buying the government's line.
If it continues to stifle demands for democracy, it will not regain Hong Kong as a thriving, prosperous city, but as a ghost town in 1997.
Some believe higher quotas will send the Chinese government a clear message.
That is the view of the United States Congress in this case, that the Chinese are not doing enough to protect the human rights.
The clock is running. Beijing has, in theory, until 1997 to reassure Hong Kong Chinese. But by then, hundreds of thousands of them may already have fled. Linda Tyra, CBS News, Washington.
Fishermen tried to keep an oil tanker from docking at an Alaska refinery this weekend. They're still angry over the Exxon Valdez oil spill, which shut down their fishing grounds. About 24 fishing boats blocked the tanker's path yesterday until the Coast Guard intervened. From our Washington notebook tonight, a look at what Congress will be doing next week when it delves into another environmental problem, what to do about nuclear weapons plants, where to find the money to reduce health hazards from the ones now operating, and whether it's wise to reopen others that have shut down. Whatever is finally done, energy officials were at least talking a different game at the Western Governors Conference this week.
You have a right to expect exemplary performance from DOE's installation in your states, and I intend to see that you get it.
That in itself marked a change. For decades, no one would admit the problem existed. Energy Secretary James Watkins is changing that part. One new wrinkle, Tiger teams of inspectors are making unannounced inspections.
That is causing an amazing response. Already, every one of our facilities are busily out there looking to see if they're in compliance with environmental laws, afraid of the Tiger team coming and finding that they're not.
Here is why. Inside the B-1 bomber, inside the MX missile, warheads made up of highly toxic nuclear materials. Until 2 years ago, the plants that made them were exempt from environmental laws. And until now, the problem was even off limits for public discussion.
Production was the key thing, and it was almost production at all cost. The environment, safety, and health were clearly way down the line somewhere. Now we've placed that as the #1 priority, and production second to it.
The basic idea is to expand the definition of national security to include the health and safety of the people who live around the weapons plants and the millions of citizens around the country who could be affected in the event of an accident.
There was another first this month. The Energy Department agreed to pay $73 million to the people around the Fernald nuclear plant who claimed that they were harmed by radioactive waste. And Energy Secretary Watkins is promising to make previously secret health data available to scientists. A good start, critics say, but not enough.
The Department of Energy is acting as kind of the fox guarding the chicken house. We have to have an outside voice, an independent voice, an independent scientist looking at this health data.
In fact, that may be the easiest part as Congress begins to grapple in earnest with the problem. The hard part is the cost. A real cleanup and modernization of the nuclear plants could top out at $100 billion.
That rivals the cost of bailing out the savings and loan. It's more than what we spent to put a man on the moon. It's an extreme cost.
And it's a problem that won't be solved easily because this problem is going to cost a lot of money. On the second day of their convention in Cincinnati, members of the National Organization for Women took their abortion rights battle to the streets. Scott Pelley has a report on that now.
The National Organization for Women marched in Cincinnati today during its first national convention since the Supreme Court's Webster decision on abortion. The face-off with a pro-life group recalled demonstrations of the 1970s when abortion was first legalized. But this time, it was now working to make up lost ground, developing a new strategy.
The anger is very deep, and we haven't seen anything like this for a long time.
At the convention, now leaders say they hope to find new allies on the abortion issue. They also plan to focus their efforts on the federal level, rather than fight in dozens of individual state legislatures.
Why should a woman in Missouri not have the rights to be protected if she's in a troubled pregnancy and she has them in New York? That is intolerable.
In her keynote speech, now President Molly Yard revealed a new strategy to enlist environmentalists, calling abortion and contraception solutions to uncontrolled population growth.
This battle is not about murdering children. It is about the lives and girls worldwide. It is about saving planet Earth.
Move back and you hold up straight and your arms are out.
In addition to strategic planning, delegates are learning tactical preparedness. This workshop teaches how to help patients pass anti-abortion demonstrators. After losing many battles, now is preparing to increase its efforts in the streets, Congress, and the courts. Leaders say membership is growing steadily in an organization energized by opposition. Scott Pelley, CBS News, Cincinnati.
Makers of cedar shingles are vowing to go to court to fight a first-in-the-nation ordinance just signed by the mayor of Los Angeles. It outlaws construction of wood shingle roofs, considered to be a fire hazard. Other cities may follow LA's lead, and David Now reports.
11 ayes, 1 no.
It raced through the halls of Los Angeles city government like one of the area's notorious wind-driven wildfires. The first ban by a major city of all new wood shingle or shake roofs. Roofs often blamed for spreading the worst fires.
Our responsibility is not to protect people's profits or industry. Our responsibility is safety.
In the mills of the Pacific Northwest, the Los Angeles ban is viewed as the latest in a series of economic body blocks. Producing shakes and shingles is a $500 million industry. Los Angeles is 5 to 10% of the market, an influential part. Some fear a domino effect.
I think that if LA goes and if some of the other municipalities follow suit, that it could have a real tremendous impact on this industry.
It's kind of tough to take when the only thing you know how to do is make shakes and your market dies.
You're going to put a lot of people out of work.
Los Angeles claims the new roofing ordinance is a matter of safety over economics. But the industry contends the city was already well protected by a 1982 law requiring that shingles on all new roofs be treated with flame-retardant chemicals. A process, it claims, that's been tested under fire, literally.
You take the flame away and it self-extinguishes. Our product is a proven safe product. That's all there is to it.
Los Angeles authorities acknowledge it's largely been old, non-treated roofs that have fueled major fires. But the new shingles, they say, need further testing.
In time, the product may prove itself. But we, with our loss experience having been as extreme as it is, we can't afford to gamble.
Though the new law affects only new roofs, the net effect for shingle mills is the same. The loss of a $50 million market. one the industry now vows a court battle to recover. David Dell, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Well, it finally happened. The Russians have landed, and it's fair to say they're taking the Norfolk area by storm. They're crewmen of the Soviet warships who are making only the second U.S. port call since World War II. But like sailors everywhere, they're making the most of it. Aaron Hayes has our report.
It's been a constant exchange from the start. 1,100 Soviet sailors and their American counterparts have been exchanging things like crazy. Names?
My name is Igor.
Sodas? Anything American. The Soviet sailors are young, many 17 and 18 years old, and a few are a little overwhelmed.
First of all, I didn't think he'd make it to the United States.
They almost needed proof they were here, something to show they really walked on American soil. American school kids visited their ship a little dazed themselves.
This was just something totally opposite of what I pictured on TV and stuff.
This morning, some business to take care of, a field trip to a naval firefighting school. The Soviets got a demonstration, but no state secret.
U.S. Navy firefighting technique was fine and part of a valuable exchange, but what these sailors wanted was a real taste of America.
Every Soviet got a regulation Big Mac, fries, and good old American apple pie.
He says, yeah, he likes it, but he's not accustomed to it.
They got accustomed, though, pretty quickly to their surroundings. And the Americans felt oddly at ease with them.
A couple of them reminded me of some cousins back home.
It's all been like something out of a movie. A little unreal for the older sailors, almost too good to be true for the younger ones. A gesture, a look, they could almost be Americans. And for 3 more days, they'll have their chance to pretend. Aaron Hayes, CBS News, Norfolk, Virginia.
And that's the news. Susan Spencer is going to be here tomorrow. Later tonight on West 57th, an interview with Britain's Prince Charles. I'm Bob Schieffer, CBS News in New York. Good night.
World record holders and the greatest track and field athletes in America today. The New York Games tomorrow on CBS Sports Sunday.
This is CBS.